Hello everyone. So this is NCERT as it is a series of the chemistry. In this video we look at the group 1 of the S block. Now the idea of NCERT series is kind of very simple. So if you look at NEET or even JEE mains, we do see that particularly from inorganic as well as organic questions being picked up from the NCERT textbook lines. So we will go through the line by line of the NCERT textbook. So try and look at what are the important the concepts that are given, and also try and look at some reasoning for the statements given in the NCERT textbook. So we'll start with the general introduction to the S block. So S block of the periodic table, right? That is basically the first and second groups, second columns of the table we call as S block. Why? Because the last electron, right, that is entering, it's basically entering into the outermost s orbital. In case of D block, the last electron is entering into the n-1 d orbitals. But yeah, so here the question is only about the S block. So the last electron is entering into the outermost s orbital. That's why we call it as what? The S block elements. And the first and second groups is what we call as S block. First group will contain lithium to francium, and we will be calling them as alkali metals. Because when you look at the hydroxides of these metals, right, they will be strong bases. So water soluble bases we call them as alkalis, right? So that is the reason why we call them as alkali metals. When it comes to group 2, beryllium to radium, beryllium, magnesium, calcium, strontium, barium and radium, right? Except beryllium, so we call them as alkaline earth metals. Now sometimes these are the kind of things that we need to focus on. So why we call as alkaline earth metals is, yes, their oxides and hydroxides are also alkaline or basic in terms of nature. Not only that, if you look at their existence, right, they are existing in the oxide form in the Earth's crust. Earth's crust is the outermost rocky layer, so they will be present in the form of oxides in the Earth's crust. So that's why the name alkaline earth metals. Now if you look at the abundance part, of course in the first group, sodium and potassium, they are the abundant ones. So we look at the other elements, lithium or rubidium, cesium, their abundance will be less. We look at them in the table 10.1, we will go to that. So in the first group, right, francium is the radioactive element. The unstable nucleus, it will disintegrate into more stable parts. So it is so radioactive that the longest lived isotope, which is francium 223, it has a half-life of just 21 minutes. So the half-life thing we will see in chemical kinetics. Half-life means the time required for the amount of the substance to become half of the original value. Means within 21 minutes, the amount of francium will become half of the original value, like that. See, understand how radioactive it is. So even in the second group, right, radium is radioactive. So generally in the table, the 7th period, right, whether it is francium or radium, we don't study much about them because most of the elements are radioactive. And when it comes to the alkali earth metals, obviously the calcium and magnesium, they are the most abundant ones. Strontium, barium, they are less in terms of abundance. Beryllium and radium, they are very least abundant in that sense. So in fact radium, right, so this is the thing that we can focus. It's present in very minute proportion, like 10 power minus 10% in igneous rocks. Igneous rocks are when magma gets cooled, right? So magma is getting cooled, it will harden into a rock. That's what we call as igneous rock. See, these things we will see in table 10.2 in the second group when we discuss about the second group. But when it comes to the electronic configuration, right, S block, the first group will have a noble gas NS1 arrangement. Like sodium, if we talk about it, means it will be what? Neon 3s1. Second group will have like say we talk about magnesium, right, it will be what? Neon 3s2. So noble gas NS2 structure. That is what is for the alkaline earth metals. Noble gas NS1 is the structure for alkali metals. Okay, this is about the electronic configuration. Now talking about the elements as such, right, the first elements of these groups, lithium, beryllium. So where is lithium? It's the first element. Beryllium is the first element. they exhibit properties which are different from the rest of the group elements. That's what we call as the anomalous behavior. Not only that they exhibit the difference in terms of properties, but they also show what is called as a diagonal relationship. Like below lithium we get sodium, below beryllium we get magnesium. Of course, the 13th group is boron aluminum. Lithium will have a diagonal relationship with magnesium. Beryllium will have a diagonal relationship with what? Aluminum. In diagonal relationship, we have seen this in the periodic classification of properties. There will be similarities in terms of how they react and what kind of compounds they form. We will see those details as we go. Like lithium, just like magnesium, will be able to form nitrides. So only lithium can form a nitride in the first group. Other elements cannot form. Now, why this diagonal relationship is because mostly the similarity in terms of the ionic sizes. Because as you go down the group, what size increases? As you go toward the right side, size decreases. So we will see that broadly the ionic sizes will kind of match. That is one. And second thing is the charge by radius ratio. See, charge by radius ratio for a cation, right? It indicates what is the polarizing power of the cation. So they also will be comparable. These are the two reasons for which we will see the diagonal relationship. And these elements, yes, we are in the inorganic chemistry. It does not mean that they are not a part of the biological systems. Whether it is sodium or potassium, we will see in the discussion that they will be a part of what we call a sodium potassium pump. That is very much needed for the transfer of particles in and out of the cell. Also, we will see magnesium and calcium. Calcium, bones are made up of calcium. Calcium is required for the blood clotting and so on and so forth. Lot of biological applications are there for the first group as well as the second group elements. Okay, so we will see that all these details we will see nerve impulse conduction, right? So when the impulse is getting transmitted through the neurons, we will see that will be facilitated by the ions. So we will see all those things when we go to the final discussion about the biological importance of these elements. So we will start with the first group, which is the alkali metals. Think about this is the regular trend group. Means what? When we go to some of the groups in P block, right? The trends. See, normally in our periodic classification of properties, what do we study? As we go down the group, what happens to a property? As we move from left to right, what happens to property? Like that we will try to analyze, correct? But in some groups, these trends will see a lot of aberrations. But in first group, we will not have that. We will see almost regular trends in terms of the properties. Okay. So we look at the electronic configuration, right? They will have one valence electron. Okay. So all of them, they will have one valence electron, which will be loosely held. And it can be easily removed. Because it can be easily removed, right? These elements can easily form monovalent ions, like M plus. And that is the reason why these elements are also having what? Strong electropositive character. So generally what we say in the table, the leftmost is what? Strong metals or electropositive. Rightmost is what? Strong non-metals or electronegative. Okay, so because they are very easily be able to form monovalent ions, they will be usually found in the combined state. Means they will always be present as compound. They will not be in the free state. Like some of the metals, right, whether it is a gold or a silver, sometimes they can be present in the free state also. Platinum. But the first group elements, they will not be present in the free state. They will always be present in the combined state. Now looking at the radius, the alkali metals, they have the largest size in a period. Because in a period, right, when you move from left to right, what happens? Size decreases. Why? We don't add any more shells. The nuclear power is increasing. So the outermost shell will be shrinked inwards. When you move from left to right, it is the same. Like say you talk about the period in which sodium magnesium is there, third period. So the outermost orbit is for all the elements third orbit. But as you move from left to right, what happens? All the way you come to chlorine, right? the outermost shell will be pulled more strongly by the time we reach chlorine, because the outermost shell is same third shell for all the elements, but nuclear power is increasing, so size will shrink. Okay, so this point we have discussed enough in the periodic classification of the properties, correct? So the alkali metals will have the largest size in a particular period, and the monovalent ions will be smaller than the parent atom. So generally what do we say? Cations will be smaller than the atoms, and anions will be larger than the atoms, because cation means what? We remove electron. So now inside we'll have more nuclear power, so hence the size will decrease for the cations compared to the normal element. But here not just that, there is something more interesting happening. Look at it. Sodium means we'll have the first orbit 2 electrons, second orbit 8 electrons, third orbit 1 electron. If you remove this electron means the third shell is vanishing. That is why we see a significant change in the radius between the metal element and the corresponding cation. And in the group, if you talk about it, right, the atomic and ionic radius will be increasing down the group. Just like normally we say, as you go down the group, what happens? More number of shells are added. So lithium to cesium, we will see a increase in terms of the atomic radius as well as the ionic radius. We will see the exact values also. When it comes to ionization enthalpy, what is ionization enthalpy? Energy required to remove the electron from the valence shell or the outermost shell of the gaseous atom. Now the ionization enthalpy of alkali metals are considerably low. In a period, just like we talked about the atomic radius, in a period if you look at the alkali metals, same example we will take, the third period, alkali metals will have the least ionization enthalpy. It is easy to remove the electron from alkali metals, and the ionization enthalpies will be decreasing down the group. Means, from lithium to sodium, sodium to potassium, potassium to rubidium. So as we go down the group, ionization enthalpies will be what? Decreasing. So here when we want to talk about the ionization enthalpy, there will be two opposing factors. One is as we go down the group, what happens is size increases. Means the outermost electron is moving farther and farther from the nucleus, so it becomes easy to remove. But not only that, there is one more factor. As you go down the group means what? The nuclear power is also increasing. What is happening? The nuclear power is basically what? Increasing. So what this increasing nuclear power is increasing means it will be able to hold the outermost electron more tightly. So these are counter. Increase in size and increasing nuclear power, they are actually countering each other. So in our periodic classification of the properties, right, we have made a separate video about the effective nuclear charge, Z effective. So the nucleus is there, which will have protons that is equal to number of the atomic number. The outermost electron will be screened, so the total nuclear power will not be felt by the outermost electron. The inner electrons, right, they will be screening basically. The inner electrons will be screening, and what we see is that only a part of the nucleus influence will be seen by the outermost valence electron. That is what we call as a Z effective. So in fact, if you look at the actual values, right, as you go down the group, the Z effective values will be decreasing. Means what is happening? The increase in size is able to outweigh. So the increase in size is outweighing the increase of the nuclear charge. And the outermost electron, right, they are screened. They are basically screened by the inner electrons. As a result, technically what we see is that Z effective value will be what? Decreasing. As you go down the group, Z effective value will be decreasing. Means what? on the outermost electron, the effective nuclear charge. Decreasing means it becomes easy for the electron to get removed. So hence the ionization enthalpy values will be decreasing down the group. So this is the regular trend only. There is no abnormality here. And the other property that is important is the hydration enthalpy, because this is something that is used when we are explaining the abnormalities of lithium or the exceptional behavior of lithium. Hydration means when these cations or anions, right? In this case, we are talking about the cations. Like say for example, lithium plus. It is surrounded by water molecules when it is dissolved. Layers of water molecules. This is what we call as hydration. Now the extent of hydration will depend upon the charge density. Charge density means what? Charge by the surface area. Now if you look at the ions, all of them, they have the same charge 1 unit. As you go from lithium to cesium, size is increasing more, means what? Charge density will actually decrease. Charge density decreasing means what? Hydration also will decrease. So the hydration enthalpies of the alkali metal ions will be decreasing as the ion size is increasing, because ion size is increasing means what? Charge density will decrease. Hydration will depend upon what? Charge density. More charge density, more hydration. Lithium, because of its exceptionally small size, right, that will have a very high degree of hydration. In fact, we will see what is the effect of that also. The hydration enthalpy for lithium, right, is very, very high. Not only that, lithium can also form hydrated salts. So lithium chloride dot 2H2O. So the higher degree of hydration of lithium ions will result in some of the anomalous behavior also. Okay, we will see all that as we go into further discussion. Now the physical properties, right, these metals will be silvery white, soft because the metallic bonding is weaker. They can be actually cut with a knife. And if you look at these atoms, right, as we said, in any period, the alkali metal atoms are the large. So they will have generally low densities. But as we go down the group, right, density will be increasing. So what is the density? It is a mass by volume, right? Density increasing means the as you go down the group, mass increases, volume also increases. But which is the dominating factor? The dominating factor will be the increase of mass. That is the reason why as you go down the group, right, what we will see that density will be increasing. But there is an exception here. Okay, the potassium will be lighter than sodium. So in case of potassium, what happens is the increase in volume will be dominating. And when it comes to the melting points or boiling points, right, for the same reason, metallic bonding weaker, the melting points and boiling points of alkali metals are low. What is the reason for that? The weak metallic bonding. So what is the metallic bonding? If you look at metallic bonding, right, in chemical bonding chapter, we discussed about it. Like electrons will be released by the metal atoms, and it's like the metal atoms are present in sea of electrons. Two things will determine the metallic bonding strength. One is the size of atoms. Size of atoms small means electrons can hold the metal atoms more strongly. And second factor is the number of electrons released. More number of electrons released means more strong is the metallic bonding. See, in case of the alkali metals, right, only one electron is released. The metal atoms will release only one electron. If you go to transition metals, right, those metals can release more electrons. That's why the metallic bonding strength is stronger in transition metals. Even if you are comparing alkali metals and alkaline earth metals, right, alkaline earth metals will give 2 electrons. That's why the strength of the metallic bonding will be more in that case. Okay. And another important thing about the alkali metals is their compounds will be able to impart what we call as a characteristic color to the flame test. So when the electrons are getting excited, they will absorb the energy and go to higher energy level. They cannot stay there forever, they will get de-excited. And when they are de-exciting, right, they will release the energy in the form of radiation. If you see for lithium, it will be in the range of 670.8 nanometer, and that will be corresponding to crimson red color. Sodium yellow. So these are important. What are the flame colors? Potassium violet. Rubidium, what is it? Red violet. Cesium, it is blue. So here the characteristic flame colors, this is a important question, particularly in even JEE mains also we can expect questions on this, and NEET also. Okay. Now if you look at the importance of this flame test can be used in what we call as the flame photometry tests, or the atomic absorption spectrometry. Using this we can detect what is the corresponding alkali metals. So if you get a crimson, it means what? It is lithium. If you get a violet, means what is it? Potassium, like that. And like the low ionization energy, because we said they will have low ionization energy, right, will mean even if you are irradiating the surface of the metals with a normal light, means visible light also, sometimes the electrons can be knocked out from the atom, means the electrons can be removed, and that's what will give us the photo current. So this is something that we have studied in the structure of atom chapter. Photo current means what? When light is incident on a metal surface, like typically cesium or potassium, rubidium, so they can be used as the electrodes of the photoelectric cells. Means when light is falling on them, the energy of the radiation will be sufficient for removing the electrons from the metal surface. Okay, so that's what will make cesium, rubidium, they are to be useful in designing of the photoelectric cells. We will see this also in one of the uses of these metals. Okay, so this is about the flame test and use of these alkali metals in the photoelectric cells. Now this is the table we have mentioned, the table 10.1, right? So if you look at the ionization enthalpy, we can see what is happening as we go down the group. It is keep on decreasing. And if you look at hydration enthalpy, why it is negative? Because it is the energy released. Why is it negative? Because it is energy released. Okay, you can see the lithium, more amount of energy is released because of the exceptional degree of hydration. The radius, metallic and ionic radius values will keep increasing. Okay, and when it comes to melting and boiling points, we can see the melting and boiling points are basically what? Decreasing as we go down the group. Why? Because lithium, sodium, potassium, what is happening? All of them will give the same one electron, but size is what? Increasing. Remember what we said? When the size of the metal atom is less, that will be a strong metallic bonding. Here what is happening? Size of the metal atom is increasing, so weaker bonding will happen as we go down the group. So weaker bonding means what? The melting points and boiling points will keep decreasing. Okay, so this is about the trend in terms of melting and boiling point. Now with regard to density, we can see it is keep on increasing. Exception is what? Potassium. And occurrence, right, we mentioned about it. Occurrence, the sodium, potassium, they are kind of abundant in terms of the availability, and the others are kind of relatively less in terms of their abundance. Okay, so we can see that in case of the lithium, what is it? It's ppm, whereas sodium and potassium, the availability in lithosphere is what? In terms of the percentage by weight. Okay, so what is this lithosphere? It's the Earth's outer layer. Okay, so what is this? It will consist of the crust and part of the upper mantle. So we'll have earth layers. What? There will be crust, there will be mantle, and then there will be core, right? So it will be consisting of crust and the upper mantle. Okay, so this is about, we will not usually get questions on what is the exact percentage of sodium or potassium in the lithosphere, like that we may not be able to expect question, but this is just to give us an idea of what is the abundance. Okay, now with regard to the standard electrode potential, we will discuss about it when we go to the reducing nature. So where we will talk about it? We will talk about it when we go to the reducing nature part of it. So just we will again revisit this particular point. Now when we talk about the chemical properties, right, obviously they will be very reactive. In fact, they have the strong electropositive character, right? So the high reactivity is because of their large size and low ionization enthalpy, and the reactivity will be increasing down the group. So as you go down the group, what happens? Metallic nature increases, right? So means what? From lithium to cesium when you are moving, of course, as I said, francium we don't study much because it is radioactive, right? When you move from lithium to cesium, the reactivity will keep on increasing. So first let's talk about the reactivity towards the air. So alkali metals, except lithium, right, they only react with the oxygen of the air. They don't react with the nitrogen of the air. Okay. So alkali metals, they get tarnished by the air due to the formation of the oxide layer. Okay. So and this oxide layer can in turn react with the moisture and form hydroxide. So this is a possible reasoning question, like, whenever we see like why the alkali metals get tarnished, what is the reason? The surface is converting itself into oxide, and when you burn them, right, they will be burning vigorously with oxygen to form the oxides. So lithium will form monoxide. Look at this, lithium will be forming monoxide, Li2O. Sodium will form peroxide. When you're burning in the air means it will form what? Peroxide. Whereas the other metals, they will form, so basically what is happening, lithium can only form monoxide, sodium can form peroxide. The other elements, what are these? Potassium, rubidium, cesium, they will be forming superoxide. Superoxide is, like, look at the formula, right? MO2 means KO2 or RbO2. So they basically have O2 minus 1 ion. That is what we call a superoxide ion. So it will be large anion because there are 2 oxygen atoms. This large anion can be stabilized with a large cation only in terms of the lattice arrangement. So that is the reason why we have the superoxides formed by the large cations like potassium, rubidium and cesium. So superoxide ion will be stable only in the presence of the large cations, because large cations and large anions, they can pack better. Okay. And the lithium, as we said, the exceptional behavior, it can react with the nitrogen also from the air. It can form what? Lithium nitride. Whereas the other elements, they will not form nitrides. Okay. And because these elements, right, they have very high reactivity towards the air, and even we'll see that with water also they will show very vigorous reactivity. And as we said, even once they form oxide, they will react with the moisture of the atmosphere. So in order to prevent them from reacting with air or moisture, right, we'll actually keep or store them in kerosene oil. So we can see that when you are storing these metals, right, we'll typically keep them in kerosene because we want to prevent the contact with the air. Okay. So this can be another question. Why do we store alkali metals in kerosene? Because in order to prevent the alkali metals from reacting with the air or the moisture of the atmosphere. Okay. We'll see question. This is a example question in the NCERT book. What is the oxidation state of potassium in KO2? So remember, in redox reaction chapter, right, we discuss about it. In redox reaction chapter, we talk about the fixed oxidation states. Like the first group, right, they have a fixed oxidation state of +1. In this also, potassium will have +1. Superoxide ion on the 2 oxygen atoms, overall charge is what? -1. Okay. So the superoxide species, what is it? O2 whole power -1. Okay. And the oxidation state of potassium will be what? +1. In fact, if you remember the rules, we actually call it as sum rule method. What is it? The sum rule method for finding oxidation state. This comes in our redox reaction chapter. So there we will have some fixed oxidation states. Like fluorine, whenever it is in combining form, fluorine always will have -1. Alkali metals always +1. Alkali earth metals always +2. Like that we will fix some. Okay, so here potassium is what? +1 only. Whereas oxygen, what is it? Both the oxygens together will have an overall charge of -1. That is about the superoxide ion. Okay. Now, when it comes to reactivity with water, we said they will react vigorously with water. I mean, I'll just show you how. Like if you're dropping small amount of lithium, right, you can see it shows vigorous reactivity. Okay. And if you are dropping sodium, it will show further more. So potassium also you can see. So the reactivity kind of is increasing. If you are dropping rubidium, see how much flash is coming. If you are dropping cesium, right, almost the vessel is broken. That much amount of heat is released. So this kind of tells you how vigorously they will react with water. Okay. And when they are reacting with water, of course, they will get what? They will produce the alkali, and the hydrogen gas will be released. The dihydrogen gas will be actually what? Released. Okay. Now here the thing is, when you look at the standard reduction potential, when look at the standard reduction potential values, so just I want to go to that table, look at this. What is the lithium? -3. In redox reaction chapter, right, we'll talk about it. As the reduction potential is lower, what it means, these elements can easily undergo oxidation. Reduction potential lower means what? They can easily undergo oxidation. That is about the relation between the reduction potential value and the ease of oxidation. So when the reduction potential is high, it means what? They can easily undergo a reduction. When the reduction potential is high, they can easily undergo reduction. Okay, so this is how we will see them in the reduction potential series. Now the thing is, yes, lithium has got a very -3.04, -2.74 means what? That is the least. I can say it has got more negative reduction potential. Means what is it? We should see that lithium should undergo oxidation easily, isn't it? Lithium should undergo oxidation easily in comparison to the other elements. In comparison to other elements, lithium should easily undergo the oxidation. But in fact, if you look at it, right, the lithium ease of reaction will be lesser than that of even sodium. So with water, right, it will be reacting less vigorous than even the sodium. Okay, so if you look at these values, right, just look at the values. Lithium has got the maximum negative standard potential. In fact, which is the one comparatively, which is the least negative? Least negative is what? Sodium. So as such, if you compare, lithium should have the ease of oxidation highest. But when it comes to the practical reaction, right, what is happening? The reactivity of lithium is in fact lower than that of the sodium. There is a reason for that. The reason is, when you look at these E0 values, right, these are actually the reduction potential values in water. When you measure the reduction potential values in water, and the reason why the lithium case the reduction potential is more negative is because of the high hydration that is happening. It is not because the lithium can easily lose electron. Still, cesium only can easily lose electron, but there is this hydration factor, right? As a result of it, when you calculate the values, so we will see how the E0 values will be calculated also when we go to the further discussion. But the more negative E value for lithium doesn't mean that it will react more vigorously. Still, if you look at it, right, the ease of reaction will be less vigorous than in fact sodium also for the lithium. Why? Because the E0 values are attributed because of what? The higher level of hydration that is happening for the small size lithium ions. Okay, and not only that, these first group elements, right? They can react with the proton donors like alcohol. Okay, suppose they can react with CH3 CH2OH, ethyl alcohol plus sodium. It will give us CH3 CH2ONA, sodium ethoxide. Okay, they can react with the proton donors like alcohol, gaseous ammonia, and even alkynes. Okay, and when it comes to reactivity with the dihydrogen, they will be able to form ionic hydrides, because when we talked about the types of hydrides in hydrogen chapter, we talk about ionic hydrides, covalent hydrides, and interstitial hydrides. Ionic hydrides are formed by what? The lithium with more electropositive metals like first group and second group. Okay, so the ionic hydrides are formed by hydrogen with what? The first group and second group elements. And in hydrides, right, the ionic hydrides, we'll keep one thing in mind, that hydrogen will have an oxidation state of -1. In ionic hydrides, the hydrogen will have an oxidation state of -1. Okay, so this is about the reactivity with the hydrogen, and this is what we have seen before just now. The standard reduction potential value, why the lithium value, though it is more negative, why it is not reflecting in reactivity, more vigorous reactivity of lithium. Okay, because this is not just about the ease of losing electron, there is also hydration part involved. Okay, we'll talk about it further. Now when it comes to the reactivity with halogens, right, the alkali metals, they will readily react with halogens to form ionic halides. So if you look at the ionic halides, the lithium ones, they will be relatively covalent. So why they will be relatively covalent? Because if you want to understand the ionic and covalent comparison, right, we have to follow the Fazan's rules. So what are Fazan's rules? They talk about the conditions for the covalent or ionic nature preference. If you have a small cation, it means what? The small cation can polarize more. Polarizing means cation will give electrons, right? It will polarize, it will pull back the electron cloud. So this will prefer what? The covalent nature. Like that, you know, when the anion is large, it gets polarized easily. Large anion cannot hold the electrons, so the electron cloud will be moving away. So small cation and large anion and large charge values, these are the three favorable conditions for the covalent nature. So if you look at it here, right, the lithium, it's a small ion, so polarization capability of lithium will be high. As a result, right, the compounds of lithium, I mean halides of lithium, will be what? More covalent in terms of nature in comparison to the other halides. Okay, so the small size of the lithium will means what? It will be able to distort the electron cloud of the negative halide ion. As a result, what happens? The compounds will get what? More and more covalent in nature. And anion wise, look at anion wise, what is the most preferred situation for the covalent nature? Large anion. So among the halides, right, we have F minus, chlorine, bromine, iodine. So if you look at iodine, that is the largest anion, right? So we will see that the lithium iodide will be the most covalent in terms of nature. Small cation lithium and large anion iodine. So that will be the most covalent in terms of nature among these alkali metal halides. Okay. Now the reducing nature. So if you look at reducing nature means what? These metals, we said, they can easily lose electrons to form monovalent positive ion. Means what? They are getting oxidized. When they are getting oxidized means they can reduce others. That is why they have what? Reducing nature. Alkali metals have very strong reducing nature. But as we see in the table, right, lithium has got most negative E value, reduction potential value, means what? Lithium is a very strong reducing agent among all the alkali metals, and sodium is the least powerful. All this is based on the values of the table. So just look at the table. So which is the most reducing? Minus 3.04, that is the most reducing. Okay, most reducing nature. Least is what? Sodium. Why it is? Because if you look at the way we calculate the electrode potential, there are actually 3 steps involved. First is the metal in the solid state should undergo sublimation to form the gaseous metal atoms. There in fact energy will be required. When you want to convert a solid into gas, means energy will be absorbed. Then the gaseous metal atoms, they will lose electron to form the gaseous ions, that is ionization enthalpy. Both these things, right? It's what? Energy that is required. Now we should not think that the reducing nature is only determined by these 2 steps. There is a third and powerful step, that is the hydration. So when these metal ions are getting hydrated, right, there will be energy released. That's what we call as the hydration enthalpy. Energy will be released. And how strong a metal is in terms of the reducing nature, the way we calculate these reduction potential values, right, is primarily dependent upon what? Depend upon the hydration enthalpy values. Because of the small size, right, lithium has got the highest hydration enthalpy. That is the reason why we will see that the reduction potential value is what? Highest negative in terms of, okay, and that is because of what? Primarily the more hydration in case of the lithium, and because the E values are most negative. Most negative means what? That particular element can easily undergo oxidation, means what? That is a very high reducing agent or a strong reducing agent. It has got a high reducing power. Okay, so this reduction potential, the table, right, whenever we have a low reduction potential, means what? That substance can easily undergo oxidation, means it will be a good reducing agent. Whenever you have at the top of the table means your reduction potential high, means that element can easily undergo reduction, means that will be a good oxidizing agent. Reducing agents are at the bottom, oxidizing agents are at the top. Just go and refer to the redox reaction chapter once. Look at this question. The E0 values of chlorine becoming chloride ions plus 1.36, iodine plus 0.53, silver plus 0.79, sodium minus 2.71, lithium minus 3.04. Arrange the following ionic species in the decreasing order of the reducing strength. What is it? We have to put them in the decreasing order of the reducing strength. Okay. So how do we put them in the decreasing order of the reducing strength? Remember, just now only we discussed, right? Whichever is at the bottom most, whichever is at the, so we have to arrange them like the way they come in that reduction table. Look at this. Which is the least? Lithium is the least. What is it? Minus 3.04. Okay. Then comes what? Then comes sodium. What is it? Minus 2.71. Then comes what? Then comes so look at these values. Then comes the I minus. What is it? 0.53. Then comes what? Silver. What is it? 0.79. Then comes what? Cl minus. What is it? 1.36. So whichever is at the bottommost, that is what? That's got high reducing power. So what we have to express? Express them in the decreasing order of the reducing power. Means highest reducing power is what? Lithium. Then sodium. Then I minus. Then silver. You can see that is what is given. So whenever these kind of questions are coming, right, the order, reducing power, oxidizing power, that kind of order questions are coming, first we have to arrange them like the way they come in the reduction potential table. Then we can easily put them in the order, because when you put them in the table form means what? We can clearly say top of the table strong oxidizing agent, bottom of the table strong reducing agent. Based on that we can give the orders. Okay, now when you have the solutions of the alkali metals in liquid ammonia, okay, so they can easily dissolve in liquid ammonia, and they will form the deep blue color solutions which will have conducting nature. So look at this, when you have the metals dissolved in ammonia, right, they will be forming deep blue color solution, and the deep blue color is mainly attributed because of the ammoniated electrons. Look at this, when the metal is giving electron, the electron can be taken by the ammonia. So these are called as what? This species is called as what? Ammoniated electron. The ammoniated electron, they are responsible for the conduction, and also they are responsible for the blue color. They absorb energy, and when they release, right, that energy will be released in the visible region, predominantly blue color. Okay, and these solutions, right, they are also paramagnetic. See, we are getting a lot of important points here. All these points we should make a note of it. Okay, these solutions are also paramagnetic. Okay, and again, what is the reason for that? Because of the unpaired electrons that are there. And when you just allow them to be like that, right, when you just allow the solution to be like that for some time, they will liberate the hydrogen and form the metal amides. You can see they are actually having a reaction here, and they will be forming what? Metal amides, which will be still inside the ammonia solution. Okay, so if you allow them to stay like that for some time, they will be what? They will be forming the amides, resulting in the formation of liberation of hydrogen. Okay, now if you take very high concentrated solution, see, this is the deep blue color, right, that's what we are discussing. If you take a concentrated solution, right, the blue color will be changing into bronze. Not only that, the solution thereby becomes what? Diamagnetic. Paramagnetic means what? We said unpaired. Diamagnetic means what? There are no unpaired electrons. Why this happens is because when we increase the concentration, right, there will be the association. So two of these ammoniated electron units, they will associate. It's like pairing. So when there is a pairing that is happening, they will lose the magnetic nature. So it becomes what? Diamagnetic. Not only that, the color also will change. Color will be changing into what? Brown color. Okay, so the brown, in fact, we'll say bronze more particularly. Okay, so this is about the reason why we have a concentrated solution changing the color from blue to bronze, and also the magnetic nature, right? Normally ammoniated solutions, they'll have paramagnetic nature, but concentrated ones, they'll have diamagnetic because of the pairing. So just remember that. Okay, so this is about the ammonia solution. And when it comes to the uses, right, lithium is a very useful metal in terms of the alloys, especially the alloys with lead, right. They will be used in making white metal that is used for the bearings of motor engines, etc. And with aluminum, right, they will be used in making of the aircraft. And with magnesium, so all these are the respective alloys. So we'll probably talk about them when we go to the metallurgy, because in metallurgy we'll discuss about the different types of alloys and their composition. Okay, and the lithium is also used in the thermonuclear reactions. Lithium cadmium batteries, right, they are used in the electrochemical cells. Sodium with its alloy, lead alloy form, it will be used for the making of tetraethyl lead, etc., and tetramethyl lead. So they will be used as anti-knock additives for the petrol. And liquid sodium is also used as a coolant in the nuclear reactors. Okay, and potassium, we will see what is the importance of potassium in the biological systems. And potassium chloride, of course, is used as a fertilizer. And potassium hydroxide, it is used in the manufacture of soft soap. Soft soap means the soap that can be readily dissolved, like liquid soap basically. The hand washing soap and all that, right? That's what we call as soft soap. And the potassium hydroxide is also used as an excellent absorbent for the carbon dioxide. It will be able to absorb the carbon dioxide. Okay. Cesium, because of its low ionization enthalpy, when we irradiate the surface of cesium with light, it can easily give electrons. That's why cesium is used in the devising of the photoelectric cells. Okay. Now talking about the general characteristics of the compounds of alkali metals, generally saying, right, the alkali metals or compounds are what? They are ionic in terms of nature. Okay, because the alkali metals have very strong metallic character, their compounds are what? Ionic in terms of nature. And if you look at the oxides, as we have already mentioned before, when we are making them to react with air, lithium will be forming monoxide, sodium will form peroxide. From potassium, we will see that they will be forming what? Superoxides. Again, that is because the stability of the superoxide ion by the large metal atoms. Okay, so the large anion, which is the superoxide ion, right, that can be stabilized only by a large cation, so that they will fit effectively, and that will have a higher lattice energy. So not only the superoxides, but even peroxides also. Peroxides means what? O2 2 minus ions, peroxide ion. So both the peroxides and superoxide stability rate will be increasing down the group, because the large anions, both of them are large anions, they can be stabilized more effectively by the large cations, and that will give us more lattice energy. That's why these compounds are more stable. And the oxides, right, they can easily undergo hydrolysis. That will be giving us what? Hydroxides. We can see all these oxides, whether it is a monoxide or a peroxide or a superoxide, they will undergo hydrolysis to give us what? To give us the hydroxides, which are basic in terms of nature. Now, talking about the color of oxides and peroxides. So oxides and peroxides are diamagnetic in terms of the ions, both oxide ion as well as peroxide ion. So peroxide ion is O2 2 minus. Both will be diamagnetic, but the superoxides will have characteristic color, like typically yellow or orange in terms of color, because the superoxide ion is paramagnetic. So in the molecular orbital theory, right, so we even study this. So when we talk about the diatomic oxygen molecule, what is it? It's paramagnetic, because it will have 2 unpaired electrons in the pi star orbitals. But if it is superoxide ion, what is superoxide ion? O2 minus 1. So one of these anti-bonding orbitals will be fully filled, because we are getting one extra electron, right? So we will be having only one unpaired electron. So the reason why we will see the superoxide being paramagnetic is because the superoxide ion will have one unpaired electron in the pi star molecular orbital, so the anti-bonding orbital. Okay, and the sodium peroxide will be used in inorganic industry as an oxidizing agent. And when we talk about the hydroxides, right, so hydroxides are all white crystalline solids, and they will be able to readily dissolve in water with a large amount of heat being released. In fact, if you take sodium hydroxide pellets and then drop them into water, we will see that the container vessel will get heated up because of the release of the heat. Now coming to the other important class of compounds, which is the halides. So the alkali metals, they will form halides which are ionic. They will be having high melting points and colorless crystalline solid. So if you look at the easy method to prepare them, they can be readily prepared from the oxides or hydroxides or carbonates of the alkali metals by reacting them with aqueous hydrohalic acid, HX type, whether it is HCl or HBr. Now all these halides, right, they'll have very high negative enthalpies of formation. So enthalpy of formation means the overall enthalpy change involved in the formation of the compound from the basic constituents, correct? So the high negative enthalpy of formation indicates, so this is the point. So this basically indicates that these are thermodynamically, these compounds are thermodynamically very stable. Now here there can be a couple of questions about the enthalpies of formation. So one reasoning question will have a scope. Not only that, we will also have some trend based questions also. Now if you look at for any given metal, right, the enthalpy of formation will become less negative from fluorine to iodine. Say for example, we have lithium fluoride, lithium chloride. Now as we see it, right, fluorine is a small ion, chlorine is a bigger one. So if you look at the lattice energy, so lattice energy, just like in simple terms we will write the electrostatic energy, right, it will be directly proportional to the charge of the two particles and inversely proportional to the distance between the two, means the distance between the two centers of the nucleus. So as the ionic size of the anion is increasing, right, what happens is the lattice energy will be decreasing. So here this one, why for any metal the delta H will become less negative from fluoride to iodide is because lattice energy decreases. As the anion size is increasing, the lattice energy will be decreasing. Now that is the reason why also the melting and boiling points also will decrease in the same order. So fluorides will have a high melting point than chlorides, than bromides, than iodides. That is one. And if you look at the other question, so one part we are done. So just carefully make a note of it. These are all possible reasoning questions that can be asked. So we are done with one reasoning question, that why for a given metal the delta H formation becomes less negative when we move from fluoride to iodide. So this is one, I'll just mark it. And also we are done with this trend in terms of the melting and boiling points. Then the second part is the delta H formation values of fluorides, they become less negative as we go down the group. Like say for example, fluorides we take, means here the anion part is fixed. We'll have a lithium, we'll have a sodium, we'll have a potassium, like that. So as we go down the group, what we are saying, the delta H values for the fluorides become less negative. Again, so why it becomes less negative is because the anion is a smaller one. Now as the cation size is increasing, right, so again what we see, the lattice energy relation. What is the lattice energy? Lattice energy will be proportional to Q1 Q2 by R. As the distance between the nucleus is increasing, right, the lattice energy value will decrease. For that reason, the delta H becomes less negative as we go down the group for the fluorides. This is about the case of the fluorides. But when we talk about the chlorides or bromides or iodides, what we see is that the trend will be exactly the opposite. So we are done with the second part, fluorides we are done. But for the chlorides or bromides or iodides, right, what is it? It will be exactly reverse, which means you take a chlorine, we have lithium, we have sodium, we have potassium, and so on. So in this case, right, already the anions are large. The anions are already large. So here what happens is the lattice energy change will not be that much significant. So yes, lattice energy in case of the fluoride means it will be a small, right. So when we see the cation size increasing, we will see a significant change in terms of the lattice energy. But in this case, right, the lattice energy change will not be significant. So lattice energy change will not be significant. So understand the reason why. Already chlorine is the bigger one. So to that, whatever the distance we are extra adding, it will make a difference. The distance will be increasing, but if it is about fluorine, right, the anion side distance is very small. So when the cation side distance is increasing means we will see a significant change happening. But here already anion side itself we have a large distance. So the lattice energy change will be there, but it will not be so significant. On the other hand, what is happening is when you go from lithium to sodium or sodium to potassium, it is easy for the formation of the cations. Formation of the cations is getting easier and easier. That is the reason why we will see that the delta H formation rate becomes more and more negative as we go down the group. Okay, so here what is the dominating one? It is the ease of formation of the cations. Okay, that is the reason why we will have the trend exactly reverse in case of the chlorides or bromides or iodides. So we will have to keep a note of these reasoning points also, why it is happening. Now when it comes to the solubility, right, look at this. Lithium fluoride will be having low solubility. Why? Because see, when you want to dissolve something means you should break it. So lithium fluoride means, look at this, small cation and small anion. So look at the lattice energy formula. What is it? Q1 Q2 by R, right? So we will see clearly that since the distance between the two nucleus will be small, lattice energy will be what? Very high. Lattice energy will be very high. So it will be difficult to make it to dissolve. Whereas even cesium iodide, right, that will be also very difficult to dissolve. Why? Because see, when you want to dissolve means you have to break the solid. After you break it, when the cesium ions and iodide ions go into water, we will get the hydration energy. So you know what is the preferable condition for very ease of dissolving? We should have low lattice energy and high hydration energy. Means we should require less energy to break the solid and we should get more energy when it is dissolved. So in case of cesium iodide, right, it will have, because large ions, right, the hydration will be less. So the hydration enthalpy value will be smaller. Okay, so that is the reason why lithium fluoride is less soluble, because it has got high lattice energy, very difficult to break the lattice. Cesium iodide, when it is dissolving, you will get less hydration energy. That is the reason why its solubility is less. Okay, so if you look at the halides of lithium, right, they will be also soluble in non-polar solvents like ethanol or acetone or ethyl acetate. In fact, lithium chloride, right, it will be even soluble in organic solvents like pyridine. Okay, so maybe this can be possible question, like, you know, which alkali metal halides can dissolve in non-polar solvents or the organic solvents? The answer will be what? Lithium. And you know, again, the reason is lithium, as we said, lithium halides are what? They'll have more covalent characteristics because of the high polarizing power of the lithium, small size lithium ion. Now talking about the salts of the alkali metals with oxo acids. Oxo acids are those acids that will contain the hydrogen that will come out as proton to the oxygen atom. Like, you know, you have carbonic acid. You can see here, this is the what we call as protic hydrogen. So sulfuric acid, nitric acid, phosphoric acid, all of them are oxo acids. But here particularly we will talk about the carbonate and bicarbonate salts as well as the sulfates. So if you look at the carbonates or bicarbonates, they are generally thermally stable and also soluble in water. And the stability is mainly attributed because of the high electropositive nature of these elements, because generally the carbonate anion or bicarbonate, they are large anions. So if on the other hand we don't have a strong electropositive element to form the cation, the thermal stability of these salts will not be that much, because we have alkali metals having a high electropositive character, they will be stable. And even if you look at the comparative stability, we will see that as we go down the group, because the electropositive character will be increasing, the thermal stability of both carbonates and bicarbonates also will increase. Of course, lithium will be exception. So lithium, because of its very small size, it will have high polarizing power. So what it will do is it will polarize the large anion, so that the lithium carbonate, it will lead to the formation of lithium oxide and carbon dioxide. Even the lithium hydrogen carbonate, right, does not have an existence in the solid form. So that is about the exception of lithium, because of the high polarizing power. The lithium carbonate stability will be less. And when we talk about the lithium, as we have seen before itself, lithium has got anomalous behavior in comparison to the other elements. Particularly when you talk about the reason for the anomalous behavior, it is because of the exceptionally small size of the lithium atom as well as ion, and also the high polarizing power, because charge by radius ratio, we will see that among all the ions of the first group, lithium has got the least radius, so polarizing power will be high. Because of this, most of the compounds of lithium will be covalent in terms of nature, and the compounds will be soluble in non-polar solvents, or even typical organic solvents like pyridine. So we have seen those examples, but we will see. So the outcome of this is that we will see that lithium compounds are predominantly covalent in comparison to the other compounds of the group elements, and they will be also soluble in the organic solvents. Not just the anomalous behavior part, lithium also has got diagonal relationship with magnesium. So lithium is here and magnesium comes in the second group. It has got diagonal relationship, where we will see that lithium will have some similarities with the magnesium. Now first talk about the points of difference, right, between lithium and the other first group elements. So lithium, because of its small size, right, the strength of the metallic bonding, in lithium will be high. So we discussed about it in the melting point and boiling point discussion also, that as you go down the group, the melting points and boiling points will decrease, and as you go down the group, right, the metals also will become soft, because the strength of the metallic bonding will be decreasing. So lithium will be harder, whereas sodium or potassium, we can even cut them with a knife. So we can see that the melting and boiling points are also higher than the other alkali metals. And lithium, though it has got a very high negative value for the electrode potential, so that is the reason why it can act as a strong reducing agent in water. But when it comes to reactivity, it will be least reactive. So when it comes to the reactivity with water, we have seen that lithium will be having a lesser reactivity than even sodium. And when we talk about the combustion rate, lithium will only form monooxide. It will not form peroxide or a superoxide. And unlike the other first group elements, lithium can even react with the nitrogen of the atmosphere to form nitride. Others will not form. And lithium chloride will be deliquescent. Deliquescent is a property of a substance. It can absorb the moisture from atmosphere and dissolve in it. And it can even crystallize as lithium chloride .2H2O, whereas other alkali metal chlorides, right, they don't form hydrates. Only lithium will be able to form. So we will see when we go to magnesium, we will see that magnesium also will be able to form hydrate. So lithium hydrogen carbonate, it does not have a existence in the solid form, whereas the other elements, bicarbonates, right, hydrogen carbonate also we can call it as what, bicarbonate, they have existence in solid form, like sodium bicarbonate, potassium bicarbonate. The lithium, unlike other alkali metals, will form no ethanide. Like when we talked about the alkali metals, we said that the alkali metals can also react with proton donors, like ethane or alcohol, etc. So we talked about ethyl alcohol reacting with sodium to form sodium ethoxide. Similarly, ethane can react with sodium, but the lithium will not be able to react with ethane. And lithium nitrate, when it is heated, right, it will not give us a nitrite. So whereas the other elements like sodium nitrate, we heat it, right, we will get the corresponding nitrate will come. But lithium case, what happens, it will straight away give rise to the lithium oxide. And lithium fluoride or lithium oxide, they are comparatively less soluble in water. So we discussed about it because of high lattice energy. So remember we have talked about this lithium fluoride, why it is less soluble in water. Okay, so then the other compounds of the alkali metals, because generally we'll have high lattice energy for these lithium. And talking about the similarities between lithium and magnesium, right? So it is mainly because of the comparison in terms of the atomic and ionic sizes. Look at this, lithium is what 152 picometer and magnesium is what 160. Even when you look at the ionic radius, right, lithium is 76 and magnesium is what 72, almost comparable. So looking at what is the outcome in terms of the similarities, lithium and magnesium, they are harder. So we have seen that in the first group lithium is the hardest, and both lithium and magnesium, they will react slowly with water. So in alkali metals all of them will vigorously react with water, but lithium is exception. And their oxides and hydroxides are much less soluble, like magnesium hydroxide, right? So we'll see it can even form a suspension in water, means not a clear solution. That's what we call as milk of magnesia, that is used to treat the stomach acidity problem. So we also call it as antacid. And the hydroxides they will decompose on heating. Both lithium and magnesium, they will form nitrite. So they can form nitrate by the direct combination with the nitrogen. So when you are heating lithium in air, ample air, then we will see that lithium will form both monooxide as well as the nitrite. But the other first group elements, they will not do that. The lithium oxide and magnesium oxide, they will not combine with excess oxygen to form peroxide or superoxide. So whereas the others, right, like in the first group, if you talk, when you are burning the alkali metals in air, then sodium will form sodium peroxide. Potassium, rubidium, cesium, they can even form superoxides. But lithium case, it will only form monoxide. The carbonates of lithium and magnesium, they will decompose easily on heating, and that will give us the corresponding oxide and carbon dioxide. Even the solid form of the bicarbonates will not have existence, both for lithium as well as magnesium. So these are all the similarities. Even if you look at the chlorides, lithium chloride as well as magnesium chloride, they will be soluble in non-polar solvents like ethanol. And both these lithium chloride and magnesium chloride, right, they are deliquescent is one, and they will also be able to crystallize from the aqueous solution as a hydrate, like we said before, right? Lithium will form LiCl.2H2O, two water molecules inside the crystal. Magnesium will form MgCl8H2O. Okay, so these are in terms of the similarities between lithium and magnesium. So the point is, all this is possibly an area for getting questions, like they may give us which of the following is a similarity between lithium and magnesium. Like that, they might give 4 options and ask us to choose which is the correct one, or they may say which of them is not a similarity, like that. So these kind of questions we should be expecting from these because we have a list of similarities, right? Even when it comes to the differences between the lithium and alkali metals, also we can see one of the possible questions can be a list can be given to us as 4 options, and they can ask us which of them is a similarity or which of them is a difference, like that. Okay, now talking about the important compounds of the sodium. So here sodium is the important element of the group. So if you look at one of the very popular compounds of sodium is this sodium carbonate decahydrate, which we call as washing soda. So generally this is prepared by what we call as a Solvay process. Now what is Solvay process? And so here we can have some reasoning based questions also. So we'll see what is the Solvay process. Solvay process basically involves 2 steps. First step is when CO2 is passed into a concentrated solution of sodium chloride saturated with ammonia. So when we are passing a CO2 into the saturated solution of sodium chloride with ammonia, we can see the first what happens. Inside the solution we will have water, ammonia with water and carbon dioxide. We will get ammonium carbonate, because we are still keep on supplying carbon dioxide. That will finally lead to the formation of the ammonium bicarbonate. This is the first step. First step is formation of ammonium bicarbonate. Now the second step is this ammonium bicarbonate will react with sodium chloride and it will be forming sodium bicarbonate. So the second step is formation of sodium bicarbonate. Now the sodium bicarbonate will get precipitated. The solubility of the sodium bicarbonate will be less, and this is the point that is taken as an advantage in designing the Solvay process. The Solvay process is based on the idea that the sodium bicarbonate that is formed is having low solubility and it can be precipitated. Now once we precipitate it out, right, so we will be able to simply take it and heat it. So when you heat the bicarbonate, it will give us what? Carbonate, and carbon dioxide and water will be evolved. So in this process, if you see, the ammonia is used, because if you just look at the final step, we are getting whatever the ammonia that is taken is converting into what? Ammonium chloride. So we have to regenerate it. Okay, so the regeneration or recovery of ammonia will happen when we make this solution that is containing ammonium chloride to react with calcium hydroxide. So if the ammonium chloride is reacting with calcium hydroxide, it will give us ammonia back. And in this rate, like sometimes these kind of questions can be asked. Calcium chloride will be obtained as a byproduct. So in Solvay process, the calcium chloride will be obtained as a byproduct. And now how the ammonia is recovered? Ammonia is recovered by the treatment of the solution containing ammonium chloride with calcium hydroxide. And the point is, because we are able to take advantage of the fact that the sodium bicarbonate is less soluble, the same thing cannot be used in the case of the others also. Like the Solvay process cannot be extended to the manufacture of potassium carbonate. Why? Because in the same method, if you have to proceed, right, in between what we will get potassium hydrogen carbonate, but the potassium hydrogen carbonate is too much soluble. It will not precipitate out. Only if this is precipitating out, means we can take it out and then we can heat it also, but that does not happen. So this is another possible reasoning question why Solvay process is only for what? The preparation of the sodium carbonate. And the white crystal form of the sodium carbonate, it will exist as a decahydrate, 10 water molecules. That's what we call as washing soda. And of course it will be soluble in water. So when we heat it, right, it will be losing the water of crystallization. So when you simply heat it, means we can see that it can lose up to 9 water molecules, just one. It will exist as a monohydrate. And if we heat beyond 373 Kelvin, we will see that even that one water molecule also will be lost, and we will get completely anhydrous form. The anhydrous form, right, which will be in the white powder state, that's what we also call as a soda ash. So what is soda ash? Soda ash is nothing but the anhydrous sodium carbonate, that's it. Okay, now the carbonate part of the sodium carbonate, right, it can get hydrolyzed, and that will lead to the formation of alkaline solution. So why the soap or detergent solutions are alkaline? This can be one other possible question. So if you look at the ions coming from the weaker acid or a weaker base, because if you look at sodium carbonate, right, so we have two ions. One is the sodium ion. We can think of it like coming from the sodium hydroxide, strong base. Other is what? Carbonate, which is coming from carbonic acid, weak acid. So in ionic equilibrium, right, we study about it, the hydrolysis. The ions coming from the weaker acid or a weaker base will get hydrolyzed, means react with water. So when this is reacting with water, you see what happens? You will get HCO3 minus and OH minus. So what are we getting? OH minus. That is the reason why the solution becomes what? Alkaline. So this can be another possible question. And where do we use the sodium carbonate? We use it for the softening of water. So we have seen this in the hydrogen chapter. one of the methods to remove the hardness of water, right, is by using sodium carbonate. And also this is used in laundry and cleaning purposes. And this is also used in the manufacture of glass, borax, okay, caustic soda. It is also used in the paper, paint and textile industries. And also, of course, sodium carbonate is a very important laboratory reagent, both in the qualitative as well as the quantitative analysis. So we'll see in some of the chemical analysis, right, sodium carbonate being used. When we go to the respective chapters, we'll see that. The next important compound is sodium chloride, which is the common salt, that's what we call it. The most abundant source of sodium chloride is, of course, seawater, which contains 2.7 to 2.9% by mass of the salt. Okay, so most of the places, including India, right, so we will produce this by the evaporation of the seawater. So we'll see that, the salt fields basically allow the seawater to come in and then make the seawater to evaporate. When the water is evaporating means in the fields we will be left with the salt. Okay, so the crude sodium chloride that is obtained by the evaporation methods, etc., it will contain a lot of other salts, because it is just not sodium chloride, it will also have sodium sulfate, calcium chloride, magnesium chloride. So there will be a lot of other impurities, we can say, that will be present. And when you look at the method to obtain the pure sodium chloride, we have to find ways in which we will be able to remove all the impurities. So generally there will be a two-stage method for the removal of these impurities. The first stage will be when you are taking the crude salt and dissolving this in a minimum amount of water. Okay, so when you are dissolving this in a minimum amount of water, what happens is whatever the insoluble impurities, right, they will be left behind. So when you dissolve this first step is dissolving the crystals in minimum water and filtering it out. Whatever the insoluble ones, they will get filtered out. Okay, and then what we have is we'll have most of the soluble ones. When we take that and then saturate this with hydrogen chloride, so second step is that remaining solution we will saturate it with HCl. When you saturate this with HCl, what we will see is that the crystals of sodium chloride will get separate out. So calcium or magnesium chlorides, right, they will be comparatively more soluble than sodium chloride. So we will see in ionic equilibrium a salt whose solubility property is less, that is the one that will get precipitated first. So that's what happens here also, where sodium chloride will get precipitated. So these are the two steps that will be used in the making of pure form of the sodium chloride from the raw crystals that we obtain. So raw crystals we will generally obtain from these evaporation methods, etc. Okay, so this is about the method to prepare the pure sodium chloride. And sodium chloride, it will have very high melting point, it's an ionic substance, and its solubility, means maximum amount that you can dissolve, is 36 grams in 100 grams of water at 273 Kelvin. Means in every 100 grams of water we can dissolve 36 grams of sodium chloride. And it's a very it's not a sparingly soluble salt, it's a highly soluble salt, so the solubility does not change much with temperature. And this is the common salt or table salt that we use for our regular usage in cooking, etc. And also we will see that the sodium chloride, right, will be used in the preparation of sodium peroxide or sodium hydroxide or even sodium carbonate. Okay, so this is about the uses of sodium chloride. Now the other important compound of sodium is sodium hydroxide, which we also call as the caustic soda. So just now we have seen that the one of the uses of sodium chloride is that it can be used for the preparation of sodium hydroxide, right? So we'll see in this Kastner-Kellner cell where we have the mercury as the cathode. So we can see that the mercury here is acting as the cathode and the carbon acting as the anode. The brine solution when it is electrolyzed, So we will see that sodium metal will be discharged at the cathode. So cathode is made up of mercury, so it will combine with mercury to form amalgam. Whereas at the anode, right, we will see the liberation of the chlorine gas. And this amalgam, when we treat this with water, we will get sodium hydroxide along with the hydrogen gas evolving. So this is what is the Castner-Kellner setup, where at the cathode we will have the formation of sodium amalgam, and that is treated with water means we will get sodium hydroxide along with the hydrogen gas. So if you look at the overall products of the Castner-Kellner cell, so we have chlorine gas coming as well as hydrogen gas, and also of course the sodium hydroxide. These are the overall products of the Castner-Kellner cell. And talking about the properties of sodium hydroxide, it's a white translucent solid. I mean, we have opaque, transparent, and then middle is what translucent, right? It will be melting at 591 Kelvin, and it will be readily soluble in water. And so when you take the pellets, you can see the pellets, right? You put the pellets in water means we will see that there will be large amount of heat that will be released. Even the container that is holding it will get warm. Okay. And the crystals of sodium hydroxide are deliquescent, means if you just let them stay for some time means they will absorb the moisture from the atmosphere, and they will in fact dissolve in that water. That is what we call as the deliquescent property. Sodium hydroxide solution, it will even react with CO2 of the atmosphere, and that will give sodium carbonate. So where do we use the sodium hydroxide? It is used in the manufacture of soap, paper, artificial silk, and also used in the petroleum refining. It is also used for the purification of bauxite, and particularly in textile industries, right, for the mercering of cotton fabric. Like mercering of cotton fabric basically is to alter the texture or some of the properties, like making it soft, etc. So these some bringing the strength. So these some specific properties we want to bring to the fabric means that's what we call as mercerizing the cotton, and this is used for mercerizing the cotton fabric. And also this is used for the preparation of pure fats and oils, and also sodium hydroxide of course is a very important laboratory reagent. The other important compound is bicarbonate or hydrogen carbonate, so which is also what we call as the baking soda. So baking soda, when you use it in cooking materials, right, so we will see that it will generate bubbles, and basically it will be able to give away the carbon dioxide. So when it is heated, what happens is the sodium bicarbonate, it will dissociate to give us what? Carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide bubbles is what will make the food, the entire food material, whether we are talking about a cake manufacturing or a pastry, it will make it very light and fluffy. Okay, so this is about the use of baking soda when it comes to cooking. So how do we prepare sodium hydrogen carbonate? It is prepared by saturating the solution of sodium carbonate with carbon dioxide. If you take a solution of sodium carbonate, means what? Sodium carbonate with water is there. In that we are pumping carbon dioxide. So that will give us the bicarbonate. And the bicarbonate is less soluble. So this property we have seen, this is what is used in the Solvay process. The white crystalline powder of sodium hydrogen carbonate, since it is less soluble, right, it will get separated out. It will get separated as the precipitate. Okay, and the hydrogen carbonate, sodium hydrogen carbonate, is also used as a mild antiseptic for skin infections, and it is also used in the fire extinguishers. Talking about the biological importance of the alkali metals, right? So in the beginning itself we said that the sodium and potassium ions, they are very much needed in our human body, not just human body but even in the other animals also. We'll see that not just animals, in the other living organisms also we'll see the role of these sodium and potassium ions, but mostly we'll try to discuss about the human beings. So if you look at a typical human body, which is like 70 kg, in that when it comes to the requirement of iron, copper, iron is like 5 grams and copper is 0.06 grams. Whereas you look at the quantity of sodium and potassium, sodium is 90 grams and potassium is 170 grams. So where do we find sodium? Sodium ions are mostly found outside the cell. That's what we call as extracellular region. So this is something that you will be used to in your bio part. and these ions, right, they will participate in the transmission of the nerve signals through the neurons along with potassium ions. So both of them will play a role. Okay, and also sodium ions will be regulating the flow of water across the cell membrane. And if you look at the other role of the sodium ions, they will also transport the sugars and amino acids into the cells. Now when it talk about the sodium and potassium, they are of course from the same group, so chemically their nature is similar, but if you look at their biological activity, they will differ quite significantly in terms of their ability to penetrate a cell membrane. So you will see that potassium ions are mostly found within the cell fluids. Sodium ions are outside, potassium ions will be inside, and also they will differ in their transport mechanism and also their ability to activate the enzymes. So one of the main role of potassium ions is its ability to activate many enzymes. So you will learn all this in bio. Here just the idea is what we need to grasp. And the potassium ions are also used in the oxidation of glucose to produce ATP. And of course with sodium they will be responsible for the transmission of the nerve signal through the neurons. So if you look at the representation, right, so this is the within the cell part where you see that potassium ions are abundant, and this is the extracellular fluid, sodium ions are abundant. So you can see there is always a gradient, ionic gradient, that is maintained, and this ionic gradient, right, will facilitate the movement of sodium and potassium ions across the cell membrane. That's what we will be calling as the sodium potassium exchange pump, and this will of course require energy, and for that also ATP will be used. We will talk about it. So there will be a considerable variation in the concentration of sodium potassium ions across the cell membrane. So if you look at in terms of the numbers, right, outside sodium is typically like 143 millimole per liter, whereas the potassium is 5 millimole outside. Inside we will see that sodium will be just 10 millimole per liter, whereas potassium will be 105 millimole per liter. This talks about the difference in terms of the concentration levels. And these ionic gradients, right, they will basically facilitate the movement of the ions. That's what we call as the sodium potassium pump. And this will of course require, so this sodium potassium pump is what you will learn in your bio. It's also the mechanism that is used for the transmission of the nerve signals. So we are not getting into the details of it because that is not anyway in our purview, but just the idea that it will be requiring energy. And in fact if you look at a resting animal, right, almost like 1/3 of the ATP consumption is going to go for the sodium potassium pump. And if you talk in terms of a resting human, that is almost like 15 kgs of ATP in 24 hours. Now what is this kg notation? Generally when you talk about ATP, right, say for example for a normal human, we will talk about the energy requirement which is like 100 to 150 moles of ATP per day. That if you try to convert this in terms of equivalent mass, that will be 50 to 75 kg, and we can see 15 kg equivalent amount will be used for the sodium potassium pump. Okay, so this is about the biological importance of both the sodium and potassium ions, and this is what we have to learn in the alkali metals, the first group of the S block. In the next video, right, we will talk about the second group, which is the alkaline earth metals. So keep watching, and we will see in the next video.